This right here is one of my all-time favorite moments in One Piece. The energy, the emotions, and the impact it carries are simply fantastic. However, I think it takes a quite unique place in the series, because while most of the other iconic moments in One Piece are based on positive, empowering, or sentimental scenes, when Luffy walks up to 𝚙𝚘𝚘 to punch him in the face, the strong emotion this moment carries is one of burning rage and anger. This shot works so incredibly well, because it scratches the itch that Chapter 502 and Episode 396 of One Piece have built up to that point. And the feeling of helplessness, injustice, and despair that not only the characters, but also the audience experience is something that is quite unique in Oda's story. It is in this chapter, I believe, that Oda fully pulls aside the colorful shonen curtain with which he covers the story and exposes the true, dark dystopia of the story world that we otherwise only get small glimpses at. And so in today's video, I want to discuss with you why I believe that 502 is the darkest chapter of the entire story so far, with an almost Shakespearean level of tragedy, and why it makes Luffy's punch one of the best scenes in the story. Oh yeah, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're actually getting really damn close to hitting 100k. The scene takes place in the first half of the Sabaody archipelago arc, that until today is one of my favorite arcs overall. The mermaid Cammy has been kidnapped by human traffickers to be sold at a slave auction, and the Straw Hats have entered the auction hall planning to use the 200 million berry of treasure they have to buy her free without causing any major commotion. Next to the general high society of the One Piece world dressed in glamorous clothes, 3 celestial dragons have joined the auction as well, and so have Eustace Kid and Trafalgar Law. Before their eyes, a young dancing girl is being sold for 7.2 million berries. Meanwhile, a very frustrated looking 𝚙𝚘𝚘, who is desperate to buy a mermaid to be chased around in his piranha tank, kicks another one of his slaves. The next candidate is a former renowned pirate captain that is now being sold off like cattle. Before anyone in the audience can start bidding, however, his mouth suddenly starts filling with blood and he collapses on the floor. As it turns out, he has bitten off his tongue to kill himself rather than become a slave. Next up is finally Cammy, who, like all the other slaves, wears a collar that will explode should anyone try to remove it. The crew seems pretty confident to get her. However, upon seeing the mermaid, 𝚙𝚘𝚘 immediately bids 500 million berries and seals the deal for her, to the shock of everyone else in the room. The now terrified Cammy tries to scream out to Hachan, but her cries can't reach through the thick walls of her tank. And just when Kid decides to leave upon seeing all this, Luffy and Zoro finally reach the hall as well, in their typical fashion, by smashing straight through the roof. Upon seeing Cammy, Luffy starts towards the tank, but is stopped by Hachan, who accidentally reveals all of his arms, and thus him being a fishman. This immediately creates panic within the auction hall, as the fishmen are not only strongly discriminated against here, but are actually banned from even setting foot on the island. And so, for the very first time, the crew gets to witness the true level of discrimination against their race firsthand. The turmoil stops as suddenly as it is started, when the room is suddenly pierced by gunfire. As Luffy turns around, he sees Hachan falling over, shot by none other than the celestial dragon 𝚙𝚘𝚘, who's excitedly celebrating his kill. In this moment, Luffy's entire demeanor changes. While the onlookers are relieved that the dangerous and disease-riddled monster has been killed, he slowly starts walking towards the tenryuubito. The heavily wounded Hachan tries to stop him, blaming himself for what has happened and apologizing that he could not make up for what he had done to Nami and her village, fully redeeming his character in this moment. This, however, just seems to harden Luffy's resolve. Unstoppable, he closes in on Charlos, who fails to shoot him, and Luffy punches him in the face so hard that he leaves a permanent imprint of his fist on his face. Now, something that I can't put in the description below is describe how much I love this scene. I mean, what a roller coaster of a chapter. So much negativity, cruelty, and immorality building up in just 16 pages. Emotional storytelling at its best. I think you will probably already have a pretty good idea what makes this chapter so incredibly dark for me, even though no one dies, no one is betrayed, and nothing is lost. I think Kid summarizes it pretty good in this panel here, where he fittingly describes the auction house as a miniature of the world. What does he mean by that? Well, you see, Sabaody is the first arc that we actually meet the world nobles and see their rule and tyranny in action. In the world of One Piece, they stand on top of the food chain. They are a tiny group of people that hold most of the wealth and power of the world. Anything that they want, they get. Laws don't apply to them, they're made to actually make their lives better. They have complete control of the world government, and if a civilian so much as crosses paths with them without bowing down, they will be shot and killed at the spot. They literally see themselves as the gods of the One Piece world, and they certainly behave and live that way. And so when Kid says that the slave auction is like the world in miniature, it tells us an awful lot about the state of the world itself. As will be confirmed later on in the story, it means that even on a large scale, the celestial dragons simply do what they want with a disregard for human life, morality, and humanity. They dominate everything and everyone, and no one is able to lift so much as a finger against them. Luffy's friend Kami suddenly is nothing more than a product that is sold to the highest bidder to amuse his twisted fantasies. So the scene gives us a first major glimpse at who the world government truly represents and what the true cruelty of the One Piece world really looks like. And just as Kid stated, the human auction house is a wonderful narrative symbol for all of that. Even though it's in the center of unjust and inhuman slave trade, the Marines euphemistically refer to it as the Public Employment Security Office. Sadly, I probably don't have to tell you that referring to slave work as employment has happened plenty of times throughout real history as well, in an attempt to soften and normalize the exploitation of human beings. It's not a mere sign of corruption within the Marines, but they literally have no other choice but to look the other way, as they directly obey the Celestial Dragon's rule. Now, what makes the symbolism of the auction house even more fitting, however, is the fact that it was owned by none other than Don Quixote Doflamingo, the leader of the underworld, powerful warlord, and one of the cruelest antagonists in the story. I think it truly says nothing good about the world if it resembles something run by Doflamingo, whose own country, that can in many ways also be seen as a miniature of the world, was one of the darkest and most corrupt places that the Straw Hats have visited. Doflamingo, being a former celestial dragon himself, is of course just the cherry on top then, as he himself has suffered his entire life under the system of the world nobles. And so, thematically, This darkest of all chapters fits more than perfectly into the arguably darkest arc of the series so far. All this stuff with nobles, people being bought and sold and walked around with collars, people being sold like items in an auction house, Hachi and Kami having to hide themselves due to long-standing racism that's still heavily ingrained in the people of the world. All that is only the first part of the actual arc. It leaves a quite disturbing and uncomfortable feel on us readers, as we were mostly used to a more adventure-based storyline with smaller villains in between. Yet here, the entire political system of the world is revealed to be twisted and broken throughout, designed for the pleasure of a selected few and exploiting the rest. Kid, who I think got a wonderful introduction in this arc, has a fantastic and incredibly underrated speech about all this, I think. I think this really hits it on the head. As Kid states correctly here, many pirates like himself have no doubt done horrendous things. However, they're not a unified group like the world government is. And it was the terror, injustice, and poverty of the current system that led to the high level of piracy in the world in the first place. Luffy's backstory, for instance, being a great example of this. And so I would argue that Oda tries to make clear in this chapter that the world government is overall the greater evil compared to the pirates, which is also why true change has come by the hands of pirates such as Roger or Luffy. So let's finally talk about that punch that I think we all immensely enjoyed seeing. It's especially nicely done in the anime, I think, where the change from black to white, Luffy's walk, Charlos' dropping face, as well as the unique sound design really bring the scene to life and multiply its impact. Based on everything we have discussed so far, I think it's very easy to see what makes Luffy's moment of pure anger so cathartic to see. Luffy is the only one who dares to actually stand up to the true injustice and tyranny of the world, who actually shows Charlos that you can't just do whatever to people, and that actions actually should have consequences. Something that no admiral, no Yonko, and no one else has dared to do. In that sense, when Luffy punches Charlos and bursts the bubble that is supposed to keep him from breathing the same air as the common people, Luffy also bursts his metaphoric bubble of divine and unlimited power. Once again, the D as the natural enemy of the gods. Luffy committing the ultimate sin and declaring war on the gods themselves. Thus, what makes this scene so special is that it's a moral and emotional island of light in a sea of darkness that is the Sabaody archipelago arc. Luffy is giving us here this moment of much needed justice and courage that allows us to hope for the world to truly change for the better with him, which is exactly what so many other people see in him. When the pirate captain bites off his tongue early in the chapter to escape slavery, Sanji, in a wonderful moment for his character, comments this. In the end, it's all about freedom. And his captain in the scene is once again proving that he is the freest of them all. Free to actually do the right thing and stand up to the world. Now, what ultimately makes this moment even better for me, however, from a storytelling perspective, is how in typical Shakespearean fashion, it is the catalyst for even more tragedy to happen. Luffy bravely punching Charlos leads to the eviction of a buster call, during which Kizaru and Shutenmaru completely overwhelm the crew as well as all of the other supernova. And in the end, Luffy and us readers had to witness how one by one, each of the Straw Hats disappears by the hands of Kuma, resulting in maybe the most shocking moment of the entire story. The Straw Hats' complete defeat. All set up by this moment right here. This, my friends, I think, is storytelling and tragic writing at its peak. And speaking of tragic writing at its peak, in the next video, I want to talk about one of the most tragic and misunderstood moments after the time skip. And so, we'll be looking at that in the next video. Thanks guys, peace.